We were so many aircraft holding everywhere because nobody could land because the weather was really bad. Every captain has the responsibility to take their decision on the fuel, because if you only think about the weather at your destination, you're not thinking about your alternate, you're only solving one problem. The first question that we asked ourselves was, are the landing performances impaired? During the engine start, we had a technical problem. Hi there, in today's video I would like to talk to you about a flight that I made a couple of months ago. It was a flight from Roma Fiumicino to Riyadh airport. I would like to talk to you about this flight because it was one of the most challenging flights I've ever done in my career, and I've been flying for around 20 years, and I've been flying for more than 10 years as a captain on a commercial airlines. Okay, in this flight, this particular flight, we had multiple challenges, starting from flight time limitations, from weather, fuel planning, weather avoidance at destination, failure on final, and then we had a technical problem on the taxi out to fly back to Rome, and then we had to take a decision whether to come back or stay in Riyadh. So in today's video, we're gonna touch multiple aspects of the operations. Of course, in a normal life, 99% of the flight of a pilot are uneventful. Okay, so you basically fly from A to B, that is without problems. However, in this specific flight, we had multiple challenges, and we had to take one by one and face them, and actually make sure that the outcome was always safe. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the whiteboard. So the first challenge that we had was flight time limitations. So if you are not familiar with that, flight time limitations are limitations that we have in order to make sure that we don't work too much. Okay, we had specific maximum duty limitations, okay, that depending on the check-in time on your presentation, okay, depending on your check-in time, this flight time limitation can change, and depending also on the sector. So how many sectors you're flying affect your maximum flight duty period, and what is the check-in time and what time you need to be at the airport. Okay, so depending on your check-in time, these flight time limitations, this maximum duty period, increases or decreases. So I have a table here. Basically, if you have a local time check-in from 06 to 13:29 local time, and you are doing two sectors, your maximum duty period that you can actually do is 13 hours. So if you get a check-in time, a normal check-in time, let's say 11 o'clock a.m., you can do up to 13 hours of duty period. Okay, so basically from the check-in to the time you arrive on block at in your last sector. Okay, so in that day, specific that day, a part of this 13 hours duty, maximum duty period, we had another hour of extension from rostering. Okay, so rostering said, since it is going to be a very long day to fly from Roma to Riyadh and then Riyadh to Roma, we're gonna extend your duty by 1 hour extra, and they can do that. So that brought us to a maximum of 14 hours duty that day. Okay, before actually starting duty, we could do 14 hours duty. On top of that, there is something called captain discretion. Okay, captain discretion. This captain discretion, I don't know if you're familiar with, but the captain discretion is an extra extension that you can do during your duty in case you get an unforeseen circumstances. Let's say we fly from Roma to Riyadh, and then Riyadh we have a problem, so we can say, once the captain talks to the whole crew and assess the situation, awareness of the crew, the alertnesses of the crew, so he thinks, the captain or she thinks that the crew can do it, and the crew actually agree to extend the duty, the captain discretion can be actually an extra extension of 2 hours. Okay, so the captain can agree with the crew to extend the duty by an extra 2 hours. However, and be very careful, since the maximum extension on top of the flight time limitation can be 2 hours, so if rostering had already extended by 1 hour, the captain discretion cannot be 2 hours, because in that case the whole duty will be extended by 3 hours. 2 hours captain discretion plus 1 hour by rostering. So as we said, the maximum extension on top of the maximum flight duty period can be 2 hours. So in that case, the captain discretion in the case of our Riyadh flight could be only 1 hour. Okay, of course, the captain discretion, you cannot use captain discretion before departure. Captain discretion is something that you use during the day if you see that there is a problem, an unforeseen circumstances, and you want to fly your last sector back. You don't want to stay there and cancel the flight. So the legislation says you can extend 2 hours. You can use up to 2 hours of captain discretion. However, if the rostering already extended 1 hour your duty, you can only use 1 hour, because the maximum extension that you can have on top of your maximum flight duty period is 2 hours. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So before departure, we had already to face the flight time limitation, because our duty from Roma to Riyadh and back was pretty long. It was around 5 hours each way, so 5 plus 5 is 10, plus the check-in, which is 1 hour and 10, depending on the company, but it's usually 1 hour and 10, so it's 11:20, plus the turnaround that we had there that usually takes 1 hour, is 12 hours and 20. So as you can see, since our maximum flight time limitation was 13 hours, we were scheduled already to do a duty of around 12 hours and 20 minutes. So a small delay could have actually make us go into the extension already. Okay, so this was the first limitation that we had to face and think about. Okay, so flight time limitation. So if you're a pilot, you need to make sure that you check this before going to the duty, in order to make sure that you don't fly illegally. Okay, so then this was the first problem, the first challenge. Okay, so we were very tight on flight time limitations. Okay, so the second one was weather related. So we arrived on the briefing room. The weather in our destination Riyadh was really bad. We had thunderstorm, sun, thunderstorm forecasted there, winds, everything was actually there. Okay, so the question that you need to ask yourself, especially if you're doing your captain upgrade, is how much fuel do I want or do I need, okay, in case of a bad weather? Because if the weather is good, there is no problem with the fuel. Okay, you can simply, I mean, you could take the minimum required, okay, the minimum block. Okay, however, when the weather is bad, how much fuel do I need in order to feel safe and fly to our destination? Okay, the first question that I ask myself is not how much fuel do I need to fly to my destination with bad weather, but the first question that I ask myself is how much fuel do I need to fly from my departure A, in this case Roma, to my destination B, which is Riyadh, and then fly to an alternate C with a great weather. Okay, usually, okay, when the situation is bad, when we have bad weather, we don't think about efficiency anymore, but we think only about safety. Okay, so if, let's say, we fly to A, from A to B, the weather here is an issue, I want to make sure that I have the fuel to fly to a destination alternate with a great weather, that I have very, like, 100% chances that I can land there. So once I know how much fuel do I need to fly from A to B and then from B to C, okay, that is my minimum block. And sometimes the alternate, you need to change the alternate on your flight plan, because the company has a commercial alternate, and they give you the suggestion, please, if you have to divert to airport C or X, sorry. But the problem is, if the weather on the commercial alternate suggested by the company, because it's more efficient for the company to divert there in case, okay, but if the weather there is also an issue, we don't care anymore, because we prioritize safety. Safety is always the first concern that you should have. So when the weather is bad or your commercial alternate suggested by the company, you don't care. You simply take the commercial that makes more sense, the alternate makes more sense with great weather. Okay, so if to fly from B to C is a higher block, is higher fuel required compared to from B to X, which was the suggestion from the company, you cancel the X, which is the commercial alternate, and you take the fuel to fly to your destination alternate. As a commander, you decide to fly to, okay, in case of a problem. Okay, so once that you know how much fuel is to fly from A to B and then from B to C, you take this fuel and then I add the extra fuel that I want to face the weather in my destination. So once I have the fuel to fly safely somewhere, land somewhere safely, how much fuel do I want extra? How much time do I want to have at my destination B to face the weather? Okay, and that's the question that I make, because if you only think about the weather at your destination, you don't think about your alternate, you're only solving one problem. But what about if you arrive here and the runway is closed because someone actually made a mistake on landing and closed the runway? Then you are forced to fly in commercial alternate with bad weather, and you don't have the fuel to fly to our destination alternate with great weather. Okay, so in my case, how much extra do I want? Usually for me, half an hour or 30 minutes of holding is enough. So an airliner jet more or less have 2,400 kilograms of fuel consumption per hour, so usually 1.2 tons of fuel is good enough. Okay, 1,200 kilograms fuel extra if the situation is really bad, from my point of view. Of course, every commander, every captain has the responsibility to take their decision on the fuel, on the extra fuel that they need to operate a flight, especially in a bad weather situation. But for me, in my case, again, I check what is my destination weather. If the destination weather is bad, I make sure I find a commercial, a destination alternate with great weather. I calculate the fuel to fly from B to C, and then on top of that, I add the fuel that I want to have in order to face the weather in my destination. Once I have this nice number, that's going to be my block fuel for that day. Okay, so as you can see, okay, in a normal day, in a great day, we don't basically, I mean, if in a normal day, if my destination weather is great and my commercial weather is great, I mean, I just take the minimum when I fly, because I know I have very high chances to fly to land to my destination, but on top of that, I have very high chance to land on my destination alternate. But when the weather is around, the weather is bad, we don't think about commercial, we don't think about the money, we don't think about efficiency, we just think about safety. Okay, where we can actually put our wheels on the ground safely. Okay, so before, as you can see, we talked about already the challenge about flight time limitations, because the duty was super long, and how much fuel do we want to fly to our destination. Okay, usually you don't only need to think about the fuel to your destination, but also you should check about turbulence en route, because if the turbulence is forecast at your cruising level, you maybe want to fly below that turbulence in order to increase the gap between the minimum and the maximum speed, and flying lower will increase your fuel consumption. So also you want to take into consideration weather en route, turbulence en route, in order to make sure that you take some extra fuel also for that in case the weather was bad. But in our case, the weather en route was not too bad, it was okay, but the weather in our destination was pretty bad. Okay, so fantastic. Then we did the flight, okay, we took off and everything, and when we arrived in Riyadh, that was the situation. I'm gonna draw you the situation in Riyadh. So Riyadh has 2 runways, something like that, guys. It's not about the drawing. Okay, my drawing is not the best, as you can see. Actually, it's pretty poor, but it's not about the drawing, it's about learning something out of that day. So that was our destination. Okay, so Riyadh. Okay, Riyadh, I think, is a Romeo uniform hotel, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and the weather was like this. We had big CB here, okay, on final. We had weather on top here, something like that also. Here was our destination alternates, okay, and then we had some weather also here. All right, good. So when we are, and the wind was blowing 50 knots from this direction. Okay, so the wind was something like this. Okay, so that was the situation that we had when we arrived in Riyadh, and we arrived from this area here. Okay, good, beautiful. So I have to say that that day, the frequency, the controller of Riyadh airspace did a great job, okay, because we were so many aircraft holding everywhere, because nobody could land because the weather was really bad. So we were many aircraft that we were trying to ask for weather avoidance. So we were trying to ask left, right, please, I take left turn because I have a CB in front of me, requesting left heading, right heading. So the frequency was completely saturated. Everyone was trying to get into the frequency to get heading. Okay, however, that day everyone was trying to talk about in the frequency. Nobody could actually talk because we were talking on top of each other. So what the controller did was a very clever thing. What the controller did, I'm just gonna make this, I'm just gonna do like this. So the controller gives for each aircraft a flight level. Okay, so for every aircraft we were separated by each flight level. Okay, so one was, for example, level 90, 80, 70. So they separate us, okay, one by 1,000 feet. And what they say, guys, do whatever you like. So don't ask for weather because you are separated by altitude, in this case by flight levels. Avoid at your own convenience because at your flight level you are clear. And that was a pretty clever thing to do, because everyone then could go left and right without asking and without actually talking on top of the frequency. The controller could actually talk to us, give us instruction, talk to basically tell us what was going on. Okay, beautiful. Good. So now we talked about this separation by the controllers. So when we arrived, that was the situation that we had. The weather in our destination alternate was actually great. Okay. So what happened? When you arrive like this, you need to take into consideration the weather, of course, because there were big CBs, huge CBs. Okay. But you don't have only to think about the CBs, especially the summer CBs. They move rapidly and they change rapidly. So what we did, instead of just seeing this picture, you want to try to think about the future, because pilot, in order to keep the control of the operations, you need always to be ahead. Okay, in order to be ahead, you want to take into consideration the wind. So we arrived and this was the situation. However, we thought, listen, this is the situation. Okay, so runway, this runway in this case from your side is the right runway. Okay, was actually clear of weather. However, the wind was blowing crazy like this, so was moving the weather also. So what we thought was, instead of just trying to be here and start to hold here like many people were doing, to be honest, okay, they were holding in this area here, hey, because this was the clearest area. Okay, what we thought was to hold around here out of weather and wait for the weather to pass. Okay, so what happened was that after like 15-20 minutes, now I don't remember, we were constantly monitoring the weather and also the fuel to fly to our destination. Guys, this is, sorry, to our alternate. This is not to scale. Okay, so this was far away, so we were monitoring how much fuel we had before actually flying to our destination alternate. But instead of holding close to the airport on this part of the airport, we decided to hold around here and wait for the weather to come back. After a while, all the weather moved there, so people were all of a sudden facing the weather. Okay, so they had to start to go around, and we were actually going behind the weather. And once we had a good weather enough, let me draw again this picture. That was this. I'm gonna draw the second after half an hour. What was the situation? This was the runways, and after half an hour, the situation was something like this. Okay, so we had some CBs around again over the airport. Okay, all like this. However, the localizer extension was clear, so we were holding here, as I told you before. The people that were holding here were suddenly facing the problem because the wind was blowing the weather in their direction, and we asked to join a holding on the localizer. So we joined a holding, give me one second, we joined a holding something like this that was with an inbound towards the localizer. Okay, we start to join a holding like this. While we were holding, one aircraft tried to do the approach and actually did an overrun of the runway, so they closed this runway. This runway was not available anymore. They closed the runway, extra delays, perfect. But we were constantly monitoring the weather to fly to our destination, because you always want to make sure that you have extra fuel in case something happened, to leave the holding and fly to your destination alternate. Okay, and another thing that I would like to talk to you, never start, I can suggest you that never start at diversion with a minimum fuel to fly from this position to your destination alternate. You always want to have an extra fuel, because you most probably you won't be the only aircraft diverting if you are diverting. And this situation, you might face some delay also at your destination alternate, so always take some extra fuel before diverting also to your destination alternate. Anyway, so we were here, we saw that the runway was clear, and then once they reopened the airport and everything was fine, we were actually able to do a localizer approach, an ELS approach, and land with clear CAV-OK weather, because the wind was actually produced also by the CBs, and when we landed, the weather was actually clear CAV-OK. However, during final, we had here, okay, a master caution with a failure. Okay, so we had on short final, after all this mess, and I can tell you that we were actually quite busy trying to managing the weather and everything, because while we were holding, the weather was also passing next to us. We had to avoid, I mean, it was quite intense approach. Okay, but when we were on short final, we had a master caution, and the aircraft told us that we had a problem. Okay, so now what do you do? Okay, so on short final, with the weather around, with that much of fuel that you already burned, the aircraft master caution. Okay, the first question that we asked ourselves was, are the landing performances impaired? Okay, have our landing performance with this failure actually changed, yes or not? If the answer is no, you have a long runway, you don't want to do a go around again back in the air with the minimum fuel, the fuel approaching the minimum diverting fuel in the middle of the bad weather, and so on. So we had this failure, we thought about it, and we said, okay, is it this failure actually changing our landing performances? Because the problem with failure on short funnel is that you don't just land. Okay, when you have a failure on short funnel, you want to think about your landing performances, because that failure could have changed your landing distance required. If your landing distance required is longer than the landing distance available, you might have problem once you touch the ground. So that's really the main thing about having problems on short funnel. But in our case, our landing distance required was not changed, okay, was still the same, so we said continue. But I can tell you that it was a continuous decision making process about avoiding weather, about thinking about which heading, changing the holding. Once we could land, we had this master caution with the failure on short funnel. Okay, so one of the most important thing as a pilot is that you need to make sure that you are capable all the time to take the failure, to take the challenges and then fight them back. Okay, so you have a challenge, fight it back, so never give up. Okay, so you have a weather, you face it and you solve it. You have a situation shortly after about technical problem, you face it and you solve it. Okay, you need to really slow down in certain situations in order to make sure that you are able to face all of these challenges. Okay, especially as a captain is important. Okay, and one of the most important thing is not to touch anything. When you have this situation one behind the other, I learned throughout my career the best thing is not to touch anything for a little bit. Okay, just go behind, put your hand on below your leg and think about what happened before actually reacting quickly and then making the wrong thing. Okay, perfect. So then we decided to land. Once we were on the ground, the airport was completely stocked, so because there were many aircraft trying to taxi to the stand were saturated. It was crazy, so it took 1 hour to arrive on our stand. So when we arrived in our stand, okay, we had a flight time limitation problem, because our maximum flight time limitation was already, if we had to fly back, was already exceeded, and we were into the extension from the rostering department. Okay, we were about to approach our captain discretion. So what happened was that once we arrived on the stand, of course we disembarked the passengers, but the embarkation to our flight back to Roma took a very long time, so we were going to the captain discretion. So I talked to the crew and we all agreed to actually extend the duty using the hour extra available in that case to fly back to Roma Fiumicino. Okay, so again guys, as you can see, that day we had a flight time limitation problem, we had a weather problem about fuel planning, we had a weather avoidance upon our destination, quindi avoidance, quindi decision making about how to avoid weather. We have a failure on short funnel, so decision making about continue or go around. Okay, continue or go around. Okay, then once on the ground, we had again facing the flight time limitation because the airport was completely saturated. Okay, and once we managed to actually start the pushback just on time with the extensions and everything during the taxi out, okay, during the engine start, we had a technical problem. Okay, so how do you face this situation? Okay, technical problem during engine start. Okay, so the question is, can you dispatch or not? In this case, some companies they use some procedures, some other companies use other procedures. However, what you need to take into consideration is for sure what are the limitations, especially depending on which flight you're doing. If it's a long flight, if you have bad weather, good weather, if what's the fuel, does the fuel changes? Okay, and then you need for sure to check the MEL, the minimum equipment list. So what happened there was that basically it was we were flying Airbus A321neo, so we had the Airbus has this system reset procedure that you can actually do to try to solve the problem. Okay, we tried to do the system reset, didn't work. Okay, in that case we applied the MEL, we saw the MEL, and the MEL said clearly that we could not dispatch. Okay, so in that case, after all this fight about the weather, about the flight time limitations, about the failure on short funnel, and so on, we had this problem on the on the during the engine start. Okay, what I did before taking decision to come back to stand, I called maintenance, because we have a phone on board. I called Mentrol, okay, and I talked to them about the problem, if they can actually give me some advice, because we are pilot and we are good on managing the operations of the flight, but maintenance are good to solve the problem, the technical problem of the aircraft. And these guys, they said, please go back to the stand. And as a captain also, I took not only me, but together with the first officer, because we were working together all the time, we took the decision to come back to the stand. Okay, we made a PA to the passengers and we come back to stand. Of course, it took 2 hours to come back to stand because the airport was still saturated, and then we had to overnight in Riyadh. Okay, with this video I just want to talk to you about all of these challenges that you can face in a day that is actually a real life day. Okay, again, 99.9% of the time it's very easy day. You just fly around and the weather is great, everything is fine, and you fly, you enjoy it. But there are sometimes, due to the career of a pilot, that there are few days where you really need to think about what you have to do. Okay, but the most important thing is that whatever happens to you, make sure that you have this extra capacity to face one problem behind the other one, keeping always being cool. Okay, just relax, take it easy. Okay, most probably whenever you are feeling stressed on board, the best thing is to breathe, take a step back, don't do anything, and then take the situation from there. Analyze the situation like from the outside, and then take it from there. Make sure you know what it is going on board. Okay, so I hope you like the video. If you like the video, give it a like and consider subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.